Hey guys, Link's back. Polar bear video is done, so quick, skip past the Smurfs and go straight on to the good stuff. Seriously though, I want to say straight up that I don't think this video is as good as the K2SO one. My bad. I've made them kind of out of sync. You know, this video was mostly made before the K2SO video, especially the principal photography. Doesn't that sound legit? Principal photography. So I got all of that one done. Then I learned a bunch of stuff trying to improve my game on the K2SO video. So that has only partially carried over to this video because, you know, I had to work with what I'd already done. Not to worry, I still think it's pretty good and it's exclusive. So that adds a little bit of bonus to it. I'll try to tell me which parts of it you like. Some of the sections in it I could probably expand on in the future and show you some more in-depth stuff with it. And I also thought, I'm looking at a couple of the sections where I used oil paints. It was hard to get the palette in and the model because you know, the palette's 1:1 scale and the model is of course tiny. So some of these I think a 2-camera operation would be very useful. So that's something we can look forward to in the future. Okay, I hope you really like it. Please let me know your feedback and more stuff soon, okay? Thanks. Here's a refresher just so that you remember what the polar bear looks like. It was a really good mixed media scheme for me with a base of lacquers and then acrylics over the top. I hope you like how this one goes together. Okay, let's kick off. For this project, I wanted to combine old and new, so I've gone with one of the original Ma.K Canon type colors, RLM 02, and from Mr. Color, and combined the lacquer hand painting together with modern day water-based acrylics. My thinking for this is partly narrative and partly to reflect my story. Having moved from Japan to Australia, I'm now back in the Western world, so I wanted to put more of a Western spin on this model. And also as part of the narrative, I like the idea of this suit being deployed in its original green-grey factory color scheme, which would be a very durable paint, and then adding on field colors for its tundra operating environment. And they'll be represented by the softer, more easy to scratch off acrylic paint. Hand brushing with these Japanese lacquer paints is quite different. Now you'll see it does take me a bit of time. But it's very accurate as well. There's less wasted time as such. Everything that I do here is being developed and put into the finish. Today I'm working off a black base coat. It was Guyanote's Evo surface primer, and that was all part of the surface texture preparation, and that's available in a previous video, link below. Now what I try to do with this kind of finish is, instead of going straight for a perfect finish as I can produce with an airbrush and then knocking it back to be weathered, here I'm kind of doing it in reverse. I'm only painting up exactly what is necessary for my finish and nothing more. It's a different way of thinking and approaching models, but it's actually a lot of fun as well. So you'll see here, I'm purposely leaving chips behind. I'll often do this over a rust-colored coat, but in this case I'm going over black because a couple of reasons. I wanted to do it for a different look. Sometimes working off black gives you a nice dark brooding look. And the other reason is because a lot of this will be covered by the, it's going to be a 3-color camouflage altogether. So it will receive a number of coats. I'm just simplifying things, and then one less step saves me a little bit of time. It will take 2 or 3 coats to get it up to this sort of solid sort of finish. Now again, you can see I'm leaving a lot poking through as a pre-weathering. But instead of actually doing it as an active step, it's more of a passive step. I'm not actively weathering it, I'm leaving the weathering built into my finish. And you know, it does feel clever and cool. I've got to admit, if you want to try this out, please do give it a go. Now here, only for the extended cut, this is part of the technique I call dances with lacquers. Remember that Kevin Costner movie, Dances with Wolves? The lacquer paint here is exactly the right thickness for coverage. When I spot that my paint has come, it's kind of, you know, you add a bit of thinner and it dries back to this level, I immediately hit all of these nice flat plates here. And what I mean by it's not only perfect for coverage, it's kind of perfect for covering it, but also drying out smoothly. I'm sorry if I've not said that very cleanly. But as I work through there, you can see what I mean. It has just the right amount of coverage versus self-leveling properties to come to a good finish. So I immediately go gangbusters as fast as I can on flatter areas like this. You can see I keep it perpendicular to the ground too, to help that self-leveling property work out. And yeah, that looks really cool there. I didn't make mention of this in the public version because I was saving this for you guys. I went with a black base coat here as well because I knew it would show up these techniques and the amount of opacity that I would require in the paint that I could show you guys here in the extended cut. And I think it's showing up much better over black. You can really see how much paint I'm applying, how thick it is, and the translucent level. You can see there, it's a little thin. Yeah, oh, look at that. Even watching this go back on, you can see this is one of the reasons I love this technique. Once you've got your paint to the right consistency, this works really well. It really is about that. Now, it's a moving target. It depends on your environmental conditions. The warmer it is, the drier it is, etc. will vastly affect your drying time, and you'll need to go from there. Okay, last one, propeller color. This is also just for the extended cut. I wanted to show you guys that for a couple of, say, the background details, places that will either depict rust or will just be kind of an internal part on the suit, I'll display, I'll do a base coat, excuse me, with Mr. Color's propeller color. And yep, that's painting straight out of the bottle. This one's pretty new, so you could throw some thinner in that as well. But for base coating this kind of thing straight onto the plastic, yes, I often do just paint straight out of the paint bottle. Paint jar, paint tin, paint thingy. Seriously though, what are these? I mean, they're jars, bottles, we all call them different things, right? Anyway, the paint thingy. From now on, that is the official pop nomenclature for the Mr. Color paint thingies. We'll put that in the Facebook group, and people will be like, huh? There you go, and up close it should look like that. That's just one pretty thick coat. You can really slather that one on. It'll dry and settle down, and that's a fine base coat. Next, Camo, faded yellow from Ma.K by Jimenez from this, the Expo Camouflage Scheme, Russian one. It's really cool. Now you know the deal, give them a really good shake, make sure you can hear that little bowl, the mixing bowl inside release. I never put out a lot. A lot of people suggest a wet palette to me, but I never put out enough paint for it to really go off. And I like the changing consistency and properties of acrylic paint. It goes from very thin at the beginning until thicker at the end, and I used that as part of my camouflage pattern this time. So a wet palette would not have worked in this instance. I've painted quite a few camouflage patterns, so I freehanded on. I've got a very good idea of where this one goes, so I'm not masking it out. This is a redo of a model I did back in 2007 or 8, so I had some pictures up beside me. So I'm copying my own thing here, so that's why there's no markers here. But you can see I do a little outline, that works well enough, and then I simply fill it in. This will take practice to do, but you can see how quick it is here, without any messing about. Outline, fill in, and boom, you're done. Next camo color is Washable White, again from Ma.K by Mig, and I wanted to try something different here. I've been really curious and intrigued by this range of washable paints from them, and using it for a winter whitewash / combination for this tundra camo just seems ideal. With the smallest touch of water into the paint I'm going on here. Now you can see when I use acrylics I use much pointier brushes. And again, I'm carefully leaving a very thin line of separation here. I mean, you guys will know that I'm more famous, well known for using lacquer paints and hand painting with them, but I did paint for years and years with just acrylics before. And you can see here I still have a lot of brush control, so there's never a bad investment in getting your hand painting skills up. Look at that, that's awesome. Yes, that's exactly the look I was going for. Coming in here for a close-up, you can see that this paint covers very nicely. Now listen, if you're not as experienced as me, perhaps go with thinner coats and build up. But I've got a very good feel for paint, so I'm probably making this look a little bit easier than it is. Apologies for that. But you can see I've pretty much slathered this on and gone for a heavy whitewash type application almost in one go. But you know, I've done this kind of thing before, so I don't want to oversell this paint for being this good. But you can see this, it's self-leveling and it's going on really nicely, and that's it. I've left it a little thin. See, there's a little bit of green poking through there. I really like how that looks. Here's another section that I did not include in the public version. I thought like it's a redo of the previous one. The previous one was nice and concise, but I like how this one shows how I developed the camouflage here on the side panel. And so I know a lot of you guys, my patrons seem to be especially interested in the machining Krieger look. And this one really shows how I go about producing hand painted camouflage patterns. I really like this one. You can tell it's a little bit thick up the top there. I wanted to be quite careful. Those hinge parts on the hip armor, I want to be careful not to get the paint too thick there, but when it dries, acrylic paints don't tend to flatten out as well. They do obscure detail more because of the amount of fillers, etc. in them. You can see I try to work in a biomechanically efficient way. Yeah, I said that. You see how when I need to do curves, I make sure it works with the arc of my my hand. I set myself up, my hand and my fingers in such a way that I can kind of pivot around a certain point. Now remember, looking down here, you can see the bottom of this is a little bit too pointy, and I know I need to round that out and match up a little bit more with the yellow there. So smoothing it out and making it more circular and organic and fit in with the other parts of the camouflage. This takes a little bit of trial and error and practice, excuse me. But yeah, look at that, nice. Filters, oil brushes versus oil paints. Now you guys will remember this. Remember I got really excited and showed you I laid all of this out and I put together this wonderful oil paint palette. Well, I finally got to use it, and it was actually a lot of fun to do it like this, but there is something you'll see later. Here I am putting Starship Filth down from the oil brusher, and I'm going to do a little side-by-side experiment to test with you and show you how that compares and behaves using enamel odorless thinners together with Abteilung's, what's it called again? Industrial Earth, which, you know, it's the same color, and I'm taking that off card, that one. Please keep in mind though that it's not really a fair comparison, because with the oil brusher I just zipped it open and dunked it on. This one, I've gone through all of that process of putting it on the cardboard, stripping the linseed oil, linseed eel, what is that? Next, I'll put on some thinner, and you can see my brush, that effect there, it's not a bad one, but that brush was still damp from doing it on the Ammo night, which I showed you guys in the other video. Now here I am, it's bathed in thinner there. You can see there that the oil brusher and the Abteilung tube oils, they're exactly the same product. You could see how they separated there, how they thinned out, how they moved about. Once I'd passed one full brush stroke over them, dipped in enamel thinner, there was no discernible difference whatsoever. In performance, but however in setup time, a big difference. Now, Christmas happened, so look at this. All of this work, I set all of this up. This probably took me a good 20-30 minutes. Maybe it took longer, I don't know, because I like doing it. I don't dislike it, I like doing it. But they completely dried out. So I had to make a second one for this model. And this is a huge difference in comparison to the oil brushes. Ouch, right? Next, let's cover the strategic oil dot technique as opposed to the random oil dot technique. One of the challenges I have with the oil dot technique is it's often talked about as if it's a very random kind of setup. Grab these colors, dot them around the model, swish them around, and voila, masterpiece. Well, I don't think it's that simple. If model making was, we could all be really good at it, right? Without much work or thought to it. So I approach this strategically, and it's quite simple. I'm going to put brighter colors where I'd like to highlight the model, and darker colors where I'd like to shadow it. So it's not difficult, but just that little bit of thought. And I'm going to use rusty type colors where I would like the model to look rusty. I mean, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But giving it a bit of thought beforehand and planning our palette on where to dot these paints in will really pay dividends in our finished result. Here I am using a dry, slightly used brush to dot into the paint on the palette. It's had enough time to dry out. The oil there is separated, so I've mostly got the remains of the oil paint there. I choose the colors and I'm placing them dry. There's no surface preparation. I'm putting them straight onto the paint there in very small amounts. Oil paints are very powerful, so just small amounts are more than fine. And blue here that I'm touching on there, that's one of my favorites, up under the arm there for an awesome shadow effect. Next, with a clean dry brush. It's almost the same one, but it's a little bit more splayed. I'd like it to be less pointy for this because I think it helps it to spread out a little bit more. And sometimes if I'm using the other brushes a little bit too long, you can get dark colors will build up on the brush, and that will stain these other colors that I'm putting in. So every now and then I'll either clean the brush or just get a dry one. I keep some of my older brushes for this kind of duty. And having mentioned this too, I think, get it the right way up, Link, enamel odorless thin is there. This is one of the first times that I've thought to myself that having a 2-camera setup for showing you guys some of these tutorials might actually work, because I wanted to have the palette in shot. Having a close-up though here on the model might have been useful for you, so my apologies that I don't have the technical expertise to bring that to you just yet, but that will be on the cards for the future when I continuously improve my ability to make these tutorials, and hopefully my models will get better too. You can see that I've dipped the brush into thinner. It was the same one that I was previously using to dot the paint on, so having a little bit left over as a dirty brush, it's not bad at all. The brush is not overly damp, the model's not swimming in thinner, and I'm using it to spread it out. You can see that when I put it on the paper, it's like a thin, it's like a medium glaze texture and consistency, but once it builds up a little bit too much, and I can feel that the model's starting to look a bit messy, a little bit muddy looking, unless that's specifically the look we're going for, I'll wipe it off on the kitchen paper there. Going for a downward vector here, I think is good on a vertical model like that. You can see on some of the plates that don't have an overly vertical component, like the back of the arms here, I go more for a stipple. Same as the back of the hand there, but on the fuel tank, so the backpack to the right side, downward streaks. Here on the tail plate, I cleaning up a little bit there, moving the paint around so that it's interesting. Back of the feet, it actually, I didn't need to add a lot of visual detail because that's a very nice streak there. You can see that one happening. The camouflage pattern and the chipped effect on it gave it such a high amount of visual detail. I knew it was good not to go too heavily on the oil weathering processes here. More to add just a little bit of color variation. Next, let's get some more value out of our oil palette and use some of those oils for simulating environmental weathering. Two of the things that I best like doing with oil paints is rust simulated effects. The things like red brown, in this case I think I was using dark brown wash, but that or burnt umber, those kind of rusty tones have a beautiful quality that acrylics have just not been able to match. I mean, there's a very good reason oil paints have lasted this long through society, through our history. They have a richness, a texture, and a sheen that we can't really match with other paints. Not that that's a bad thing. Sometimes the flatness of acrylics is a wonderful thing, but for really bringing things to life with an oily, grimy texture, oil paints really do shine. So I like using that those dark brown ready tones for that. Dust effects work really well with oil paints. I love how they turn out. In this case, I was using the light dust color across the top of the foot. Now, a couple of you have asked me, you know, how did I get those effects on the red foot there? And that was a combination of the light dust and snow white oil paints. The brand's not super important. Well, it's not important whatsoever. These Acrylics paints aren't special or high quality in any way at all. They're just oil paints with cool names on them that us modelers will understand. Winsor Newton, any of the other regular brands of oil paints, if you can get them, they'll work just fine too. And you could mix, you could get a buff color or just mix a tiny little bit of that red-brown color into white to get a dusty color too. Once I had a good dusty effect on that red foot, I stippled in some Primer Red by Acrylics there. It's perfect for this one. I suggest mixing your own colors for some things. For this one, that one's perfect. One of the questions that comes up very often is how to weather the leg pipes on these Machine & Krieger kits. And whilst we've got these oil paints out, I've found them to be some of the best paints out there to use on them. And it's for a variety of reasons, but one of the most important is that they're inherently flexible. Oil paints do dry, but If you've ever, you're a bad kid and you went up and you put your fingernail on one of those old oil paintings on the wall, before you got in trouble, did you notice that it was a little bit soft? Now I don't know the science or technicalities behind this, but I have noticed that oil paints seem to dry and retain a great deal of flexibility. So using the very same paint palette that I've used to develop the dusty effects on the legs, I make sure to weather the leg pipes up. Now there's no primer, there's nothing on them whatsoever. I paint the oil paints directly onto the plastic. The ankle pipes, however, they have a coating here of Mr. Color Flat Black as a primer. But in the future, I'll probably be going with the Camo One Shot on them, just because it's so easy to work with. Hi guys, thank you very much for making it through with me. I hope you like some of these detail shots, and I do hope some of these processes have helped give you some insight into how I made it and will help you on the next model. I'll do another machining Krieger soon, and I'm going to do a very different approach. In fact, almost 180 degrees opposite to this guy. So I'll share an update with you on that very soon. Thanks again. I get my Star Wars kits, paints, and tools from my local hobby shop, Hobby.Co. And let's do our part, support local, and check them out. If you're also in Australia, get your local hobby shop to contact Ryan at Hobby.Co and they will get Star Wars in for you. Cool, right? Huge shout out to my top patron supporters, Ivan, MB, Grant, Con, Simon, and Robert. Thanks guys. And an extra special shout out to the Paint on Plastic patron community who make these videos happen. Thanks guys. Hey guys, Link here.